Hey guys, so what I want to talk about today is the Mixbus. I want to talk about it because I posted the reels the other day, and they were getting quite a lot of engagement. People were asking me questions, so I'm like, you know what? Let me break down why I have my Mixbuses the way how I have them. Because everybody got a different perspective on how they hear things, how they want to do things, and all that stuff. And I've watched plenty of videos about people talking about mixed buses. And look, I feel like when it comes to mixed buses, it's your own personal flavor, it's your own personal taste. Just treat it the way how you like to hear things. There's no right, there's no wrong. Some people like this, some people like that, some people like it. Some people don't like to have anything on the mix bus at all, and it's perfectly fine. It's just like what do you want your record to be, and how you want it to feel. But as that all being said, so let me break down my mix bus philosophy, because the way how I have my mix buses is not quite, it's kind of unorthodox in a sense where I got two mixed buses, but they all parallel at the same time. So they work. It's basically SSL Sigma. SSL Sigma has the ability to split your mix into mix bus A and mix bus B, and I think I've mentioned that multiple times before. Let me break down my mix buses and explain why I have them the way how I have them. So let me start with the mix bus, with the mix bus A. And just to make you guys a little bit more familiar with my setup and what I have, I run everything on Orion HDs, and I'm using the Avid HDX card. Everything goes to my computer. Everything is routed back to SSL Sigma for the summing, and then the summing is being split into two mix buses, mix bus A and mix bus B. So let's start with the mix bus A. So throughout the years, I've had debugs before. I've had debugs before. So that was my first summing box. I think right after debugs, I went into Sigma. But through the years, even when I had Sigma, at the very beginning, I only was using one mix bus. I wasn't using both of them. The second one kind of came along the way when I found out certain things about the way how I heard things. So let me just break it down like this. The reason why I have two mix buses is because I don't think that having only one mix bus is beneficial for somebody that works with multiple genres. And I'm the type of person, I don't work with only one genre. I can mix hip hop one day, I can mix R&B the next day, I can mix country another day, I can mix some pop stuff, I can mix some house. Like I go, through different genres weekly. So the reason why I don't think it's good to have only one mix bus is because it kind of limits your ability to make decisions based on the genre. So if somebody's like primarily works in one specific genre, if you're only working with rock music, or you're only working with country, or any, like if you're working specifically with one genre, you're probably going to build your mix bus tailored towards that specific sound. But if you juggle different genres and different styles, then you most likely would benefit from having multiple mix buses and kind of go around it. I personally want to have another mix bus in my setup that is going to be completely separate from what the Sigma is doing, and that would be like third mix bus that is just doing its own thing. But that's down the line. I'm not going to talk about that right now. So everything that I said right now up to this point leads me to Mixbus A. I said it for a couple of times. So my Mixbus A is basically Neve Portico, MBP2, Avalon 747, and Kush Clariphonic. So those are the three processors that I have on Mixbus A, and everything is being returned back into the Neumann 48, MT48. So that's Mixbus A. And let me discuss that. Let me talk about that. The reason why I have that specific configuration of tools in that mix bus is because I call this mix bus vibe mix bus. This is where all the fun stuff happens. This is my mix bus when I can have fun. I can spread things a little bit more. You know, I got my stereo imager. Everybody that had played with Portico or has Portico, you guys understand the type of sound that Portico creates. It's a beautiful sound, it's an amazing sound, but I feel like it's one of those things that it gives a lot, but it also takes away certain things. It takes away, and it's not bad, it's not good. It's just the way how the tool works. So because it adds certain mojo and certain feel to the mixes, I don't always find it to work on everything that I work on. And not to say that Portico is not the great tool. I love it. Look, Portico is one of the best pieces probably ever made, in my opinion. But as I'm saying, sometimes it just gives a little bit too much and it takes a little bit too much of different things. So back in the day, I had Sigma and I had Portico. So Portico was my very, very first thing on the master bus. I had Sigma going straight into Portico and nothing else. And I have an older Portico with high pass filters set to 250 hertz. The newer ones are at 125, which I think is kind of a mistake because for a certain genre, especially anything bass heavy or like anything that you want that punch, you want kind of to high pass as much as you can. I personally think if it was like 350, 400 hertz, it would be better, but you know, whatever. I got 250, 125 is for newer versions. But going back to that, so when I was working on a lot of records back then, at the time I was working on a lot of hip hop, a lot of like more heavy hidden stuff. I was finding that Portico was doing a lot to the mid range that I liked. It was softening the top end in a nice, pleasant way, but it was killing the low end. It was taking a lot of grit and a lot of like the tightness that I was looking for, especially for that specific genre, away. And again, it's just the way how it's designed. It's, you know, I don't want to say it sounds vintage, but it does have a vintage feel. It does kind of sound vintage. So that's the reason why I was like, you know what, I need to figure out how I can still keep it, but I don't want to use it on every single thing. That's why the idea of 2 mix buses came around. And you know, I always saw that there's a mix bus A and mix bus B in Sigma. I just never really knew how to use it right until I started like experimenting. So my mix bus A, Portico, Avalon, 747, and Clariphonic. So Portico is giving me a lot of flavor, a lot of like, it's like an ear candy. It's something that is fun, but it's not always clinical. I don't, you know, technically Portico is considered is a master bus processor, is a mastering tool. I don't know if Portico would be, it's not a clinical master tool. It's not something that it's, you know, it's not surgical tool. It's more of a vibe tool, in my opinion. That's how I use it. So all this stuff that I sent to that mix bus is more for the vibe. I'm like, if I want the pianos to be, you know, to be wider and I want them to feel a little bit moodier and I want it to like just be more fun, I'm using mix bus A. Going into, you know, so Portico has, I love the compressor in Portico, the limiter and the stereo enhancer. But they just have very specific character, very specific sound. They're not like SSL, you know, they're not like G-Bus. The compressor in Portico is not like a G-Bus compressor. It's not like a, even like a New Mu or Vari Mu or any of those compressors. Like it's its own thing. It's very, very smooth. It's very, I believe it's a VCA. I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's a VCA compressor. But it sounds, the crazy thing about Portico that I always try to understand why, but it's like Portico sounds like it has tubes or something in it, or maybe a tape. It sounds very, it just has a lot of something to it. It has a lot of character that it just gives from the box. So I go from that and I'm going to 747, which I love this thing too, but 747 definitely much tighter. It has much tighter compressor. It has tubes in it, obviously. It has a passive EQ, which I used to do some lifts, mainly just to get Portico coloring in a certain place. The EQ on the Avalon, I use it to correct the frequency shifts that Portico has. But I also use the compressor on 747. I love the way how the tubes kind of, give that squash to it. But I only use, I don't like to compress too much. I usually like to have maybe 2-3 dB of gain reduction top. And because, I'm doing Portico around 1, 2, maybe 3, and same thing with the Avalon. And again, different songs might have a little bit different results. Sometimes I'm like just kissing the gain reduction with Portico. Sometimes I'm doing a little bit more. So it really depends on the song. And then I have a clariphonic at the end of the chain to give everything a little bit more lift. Clariphonic is more of a clinical tool. It doesn't really have, I don't want to say vibe because it does its own thing, but it's not like Portico, it's not like 747. Clariphonic is just straight clarity, straight, I think that's why it's called clariphonic. But, I use it to lift. I use it to specifically give a little bit more clarity, a little bit more lift, and, whatever the mix requires with clariphonic. And then it goes to Neumann MT48. And the reason why I'm using MT48 at the end of that chain and not, for example, Burrow, which I have on the other mix bus, is because I'm already getting so much from those two, specifically from Portico and Avalon, that I don't want my converter to give me anything more. I want the converter to be very clinical, very, very clean. And the good thing with MT48 is it has a mastering grade conversion. It sounds amazing. It's very, very transparent. It has a lot of headroom. I believe it has 136 or 138 dB of headroom, which is 10 dB more than what normally most of the converters have. So with all that, that's the image of the Mixbus A. So as I'm saying, it's more for the vibe, it's more for the flavor, for the texture of what I'm doing. For me, that bus is about me sending the instruments, sends, reverbs, whatever I want to send to it, that I want it to feel a little bit more fun in the mix. A little bit more mojo, more mid-range, more fun. And again, Mixbus A and Mixbus B are technically very, very different, but I'm gonna talk about it at the very end. So that's Mixbus A. Mixbus B, I call the API Mixbus because on Mixbus B, I have an API 2500 and I got an API 5500. And those tools fundamentally are completely different than Portico and 747. Why? Because they are, like, the philosophy, I guess the sound philosophy for API is completely different. It's about the focus, it's about the clarity, it's about the punch, it's about the power, it's about everything that Portico is against. And not necessarily against, but it's like, it's just complete opposite. So as my Mixbus A is going for the vibe, my Mixbus B is going for the clarity, is going for the punch, is going for everything that I want to sit right here in the center. So usually what I do with my Mixbus B, those are the drums, this is the bass, those are the vocals, those are the effects, usually like, vocal reverbs, delays, and all that stuff. Any type of effects. If I want them to be more focused, I'll use Mixbus B. If I want my reverbs, all the effects, vocal effects to have a little bit more mojo flavor and a little bit more fun, I would send them to Mixbus A. So I just go back and forth. And as I mix, sometimes I might start with one mix bus and then I shift everything, not everything, but I would start with one mix bus and I'm like, oh, I want to shift this group to a different bus. So I can like go back and forth and see what matches the sound better. So API on the Mixbus B gives me much more clarity. It gives me the punch. It gives me the power. That's my Mixbus. So basically the way how I see my Mixbuses, right? Mixbus B is right here. is the center of my mix. The focus is what I want the main focus to be. You know, I'm a drum, bass, vocals type of guy when it comes to what I want my mix to be about. And I'm not saying everything else doesn't matter, because it does, but this is my core. So the core instruments, the core things go right there in the center. And then for the mix bus A, with Portico, Sigma, and all that, I mean Portico and 747, it kind of surrounds the mix bus B. So B is right here, and the mix bus A gives it the, you know, the thing around it. So that's kind of how I view my mix buses, where when I close my eyes, I know exactly what I'm gonna get with which mix bus when it comes to just spacing in the mix. And then the mix bus B, the conversion on that, the AD, analog to digital conversion after that, I use the Burrow B2 Bomber, which is an amazing converter. And again, that converter is not clinical. And when I'm saying that, it doesn't mean that it's not a mastering converter, because it is a mastering converter, but it's very, very different from what the MT48 is doing. And the reason why I don't use the MT48 on the API bus, which technically would benefit from a little bit more headroom and all that stuff, is because if I would use the burr on the mix bus A, I'm getting way too much flavor already. I'm getting too much, and on top of that, I would get the, you know, burr kind of has that tape saturation feel to it, and I don't want to saturate anymore my mix bus A. I want the mix bus A to be clean, and mix bus B, because I'm getting all the clarity, I'm getting the cleanliness. When I put it into burl, the burl just that little upper harmonics, especially mid-range and the top end, from the kicks and the you know, the drums and the bass and all that stuff, it just gets like a little bit of extra saturation that I like. A lot of people are saying that burl sounds like a tape. I don't know if it fully sounds like a tape, but it definitely has something in it that is a little bit more tapey. I don't want to say it because it doesn't sound like a tape, but it's like for me, I don't even look at Burrow B2 as it's not a converter to me. It's more of a color box with the ability it's a color box with a conversion in it. So when I have the APIs going into the Burrow, like that combination gives me that lift in the bottom end that I enjoy and I like. So that's why the combination of tools that I'm using is mainly based off my personal preference of how I like to hear things and how I can navigate in the world that I live in when it comes to mixing. And you know, I've had different things throughout the years in my mix buses. Like I'm not gonna be, maybe I'm gonna make a video one day about the history of like everything that I had on my mix buses prior and like what I was using, how I was approaching the mixes, but that's for another time. So with all that I said, with those two mix buses, it gives me ability to flip the buses, the sub buses, the groups with all the other instruments on the go, on the fly. How does the piano sound with the mix bus A? Okay, does it fit? Is that something that I'm looking for? If it's not, let me try how it sounds in the mix bus B. Is that something that I'm looking for? And again, as I said, I usually, like, when I have a mix, I probably would have 5 to 6 groups going into mix bus B, and then I'll have the rest of the groups going into mix bus A. So I would say most of the things go to the mix bus A, but as I'm saying, it's because I don't want the whole focus to be, you know, I don't want all the 16 groups to go into, or let's say not even 8. Let's say I don't want 10 groups go into the mix bus B, because then I'm gonna have too many things cluttered in the center of my mix, which I don't want. As I'm saying, my main thing when it comes to mix bus B is drums, vocals, bass. Sometimes I do hi-hats. Hi-hats for me, it's like either or, like depends on how, it really depends on how I feel and how the song feels. And then maybe the reason why I prefer, usually I would say 75% of the times, the reason why I prefer to send the effects into the Mixbus B, which is like, I usually do Bricasti, Valhalla's, anything, any of the reverbs, is because I find the reverbs to already be lushy, and I already find them to kind of have their own space that they create. If I send them into the Mixbus with Portico, because it adds so much more to it, sometimes I find the mid-range gets a little bit too, what's the right, not muddy, but what's the right word? I guess I would call it muddy, but it's not the right word that I'm looking for. It's like somewhere in the back of my head, but I can't really recall. So I like when the effects are tight. So the difference, for example, the difference when it comes to how effects are affected in the Mixbus A and Mixbus B. When the reverbs go to Mixbus A, they feel a little bit more cloudy. That's the word I was looking for. They are a little bit wider, yes, but they are a little bit more cloudy. They don't have like that cleanliness that I'm looking for in the effects. It's almost like if I have the vocal here and I send the effects, like a vocal effect to Mixbus A, it like goes right here. So the vocal is here, and then like the effects kind of like catch the vocals here. So they kind of surround it. But when I send the effects into the Mixbus B, then it's like when I have the vocal here, the effects are sitting like on top. I'm getting the clarity, but it's like they're not touching. I have the space in between the vocal and the rest of the effects. It's not being like cluttered or cloudy or muddy and all that stuff. Obviously, I usually just, I usually would EQ the effects a little bit more and just make sure everything is in the right place. But that's kind of the philosophy of my two Mixbuses. I don't want to make this video too long. I'm already talking too long. But again, a lot of guys, a lot of you guys were hitting me up, and I was trying to like reply to everybody, but it's a lot of work. So I hope everything that I just said makes sense to explain how I operate within my mixing space. And I got the Manly going into the two, like, I'm not going to talk about Manly because Manly is basically like, Manly, like Massive Passive, combines both two buses together. But that happens in Pro Tools, and it's, Manly is, yes, Manly is technically a part of my mix bus, but that's kind of a glue that merges both of the worlds together. So that's kind of like the merger between the Mixbus A and Mixbus B. And yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, those are my Mixbuses. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I know it's a little bit, I don't know if it's unorthodox approach to mixing. I don't really think it is, because again, there is a reason why SSL gave us ability to have Mixbus A and Mixbus B. So because I have that ability, I'm just taking full advantage of it. Why not? If I have it, I'm gonna use it, But anyway, yeah, that's basically it. I hope you guys took a little 1-2 from this, and I'll see you again sometime. Peace out.